appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government.
The measure of that restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values, more noble than mere monetary profit. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort, the joy, the moral stimulation of work no longer must be forgotten in the mad chase of evanescent profit. Restoration calls, however, not for changes in ethics alone. This nation is asking for action, and action now. Our greatest primary task is to put people to work.
The presidency of Franklin Roosevelt represented a return to the foundations of the American Constitution. Before his entry, the country was at the brink of disaster by the willful hands of lust for profit emanating from the self-seekers at the offices of Wall Street. In the first 100 days of his administration, policies were enacted to break their power. Glass-Steagall, in particular, was put in place, prohibiting the enemy from regaining control of the nation's system of finance. With the Glass-Steagall protection, FDR's economic program went ahead, rebuilding the country physically and restoring confidence and dignity back to the American people.
Hunger drove our people to the bread lines. Anxiously we waited for some sign of better days. Then came the federal government's work program.
In May 1933, a new chapter was written in American public policy when the plan was brought before the representatives of the people in Congress. An act was passed creating the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority.
With the financial structure of the country strengthened and revitalized, with new impetus given to commerce and industry, his mind now turned to farmers and their plight.
Roosevelt's National Recovery Act has brought forth the pledge of millions to aid his program, the pledge to follow his leadership, and the pledge to bring back prosperity.
The recovery of the country was swiftly underway. What Wall Street was succeeding in internationally was met with great resistance in America. With the Glass-Steagall Act, the work programs, the agricultural programs, the programs to enhance America's industrial capability were made possible. Franklin Roosevelt's productive measures were advancing the nation away from disaster and economic depression so effectively, they had to be stopped.
Against a return of the evils of the old order, there must be a strict supervision of all banking and credits and investments. There must be an end to speculation with other people's money.
On the morning of July 1st, 1933, retired General of the Marine Corps, Smedley Darlington Butler, received a phone call from an American Legion official in Washington. He was told to expect and receive the company of 2 veterans currently on their way from Connecticut to discuss matters of great importance. Being a former military man, Butler would receive the company of any veteran wishing to meet with him. The 2 veterans, within 5 hours from the call, finally arrived at Butler's home, dressed quite fastidiously and rolling in with a chauffeur-driven Packard limousine. The 2 men, Bill Doyle and J.L.C. McGuire. Who did McGuire represent? Grayson Mallet Provo Murphy, head of a leading New York brokerage firm trading in stocks and international syndicated bonds in collusion with the House of Morgan. Grayson, honored with the exclusive title of J.P. Morgan's preferred client list. Grayson, who met with Morgan guidance in Paris in February 1919 to found the U.S. Veterans Organization known as the American Legion, by assistance of $125,000 of his personal money. What business did men of this class wish to gain from a retired General Butler?
I was to get 200 or 300 legionnaires from around that part of the country and bring them on a special train to the American Legion Convention in Chicago. They would sit around in the audience, be planted here and there, and I was to appear in the gallery. These planted fellows were to begin to cheer and start a stampede and yell for a speech. And then I was supposed to go to the platform and make a speech. I said, make a speech? About what? Oh, they said, we have one here. And they pulled out this speech, and they said, we will leave it here with you to read it over, and you see if you can get these fellows to come.
Smelling a rat and wanting to test how serious they were about the scheme, Smedley challenged them by opposing the inability of sufficient resources to pull off such a scenario. How could all these veterans afford to travel and stay at the convention? Butler got his reply.
And they hauled out a bank deposit book, and they showed it to me. I think it was $42,000 in deposits on that occasion, and on another occasion, it was $64,000.
Wishing to get to the bottom of who were the real hotshots of the scheme, Butler demanded to speak to a higher-up, and McGuire stepped down. Robert S. Clark took his place, also a member like Grayson of the exclusive J.P. Morgan Preferred Clients List. The theme remained the same. Clark and the others wanted Butler to lead the crowd at the upcoming American Legion Chicago Convention of September 1933 to rouse them up with some paid assistance, and amidst the moment, deliver a prepared speech to convince the Roosevelt administration, with the veteran support, to reverse its previous policy of removing the U.S. dollar from the gold standard. Now, why would the retired general care for Franklin Roosevelt to return to the gold standard? Most importantly to him, how would that move be in any way beneficial to the military veterans of America? It wasn't, and Clark admitted it. Clark also disclosed that the prepared speech Butler was expected to deliver at Chicago cost a lot of money because it was written by John W. Davis, former Democratic candidate for the presidency and now official attorney for the offices located on 23rd Wall Street, New York, Manhattan. The office of J.P. Morgan and Company. Morgan's preferred client assured Butler that they could succeed in convincing Roosevelt to change the tune of his policy.
You know the president is weak. He will come right along with us. He was born in this class. He was raised in this class, and he will come back. In the end, he will come around. But we have to be prepared to sustain him when he does.
Butler never went to Chicago. Yet, McGuire continuously visited and bribed the former general, up until McGuire was deployed by his backers for a 7-month trip in Europe, visiting Holland, England, France, Fascist Italy, and Nazi Germany. For what reason? Smedley would soon find out. On August 22nd, 1934, Butler received a phone call. It was McGuire, telling him that they needed to meet that day. Butler agreed. He joined McGuire at the Bellevue Hotel in Philadelphia and was met with the phrase that the time has come to get the soldiers together. While in Paris, McGuire explained, a meeting took place to establish a superorganization that will back a 500,000-person army of U.S. veterans to march onto the Capitol and offer their support for President Franklin Roosevelt to help turn his mind away from the New Deal. At the Paris headquarters of Morgan and Hodges, the plan was detailed, and among others, Butler was chosen to lead the 500,000 veterans. $3 million were ready to be spent, and $300 million more could be generated if they needed it. And arms will be supplied by DuPont's Remington Company. The show of force would help Roosevelt step down from his duties and make way for an assistant president, a general secretary of affairs, as they called it, that would assume his responsibilities. One of them would be to get, by their standards, a correct economic policy in place.
We have a solution for the unemployment situation, you know. Roosevelt had muffed it terrifically, but we have a plan. I saw it in Europe. Adolf Hitler had the plan, putting all of the unemployed in labor camps or barracks. That will solve the problem overnight. And when we get into power, that is what we will do. That is our ideal plan.
The superorganization was to announce its emergence in a few weeks, he told Butler. And indeed, in September 1934, the press announced the emergence of the American Liberty League, denouncing the New Deal and Roosevelt. The treasurer of the League was Grayson Mallet Prevost Murphy, one of its financiers, Robert S. Clark. The directors of the American Liberty League were of DuPont and J.P. Morgan notoriety, speculators and financiers of Wall Street. Funding provided by big shots like Andrew Mellon Associates, Rockefeller Associates, and heads of General Motors and Sun Oil Associates. In fact, more than 3 members of the DuPont family bankrolled $25,000 each to the Liberty League. Wall Street was looking to recruit retired General Smedley Butler to pull off a fascist coup in America, just as they were funding and backing Mussolini and Adolf Hitler.
Appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship.
Mr. President, very obviously, Wall Street plans to take over the U.S. government. Very obviously, Butler is telling the truth. I have been looking for just this attempt at a Wall Street coup if your policies looked like succeeding. Wall Street is the enemy of our government.
On 59 Wall Street, Brown Brothers Harriman executives set up Union Banking Corporation, UBC, as nothing more than a front for Adolf Hitler's early backer, millionaire Fritz Thyssen. Brown Brothers and UBC together shipped millions of dollars of gold, fuel, steel, coal, and U.S. Treasury bonds to Germany, aiding Adolf Hitler's buildup for war. Business continued uninterrupted until 1942, 10 months into the United States entering the war. UBC was seized holding $3 million in suspicion for the Nazis. American Liberty League contributors Rockefeller and DuPont did more than finance an attempted coup against Roosevelt and the New Deal. Through John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, Hitler's armored trucks and running aircraft were supplied with fuel. They partook, along with the cartels of Fritz Thyssen, in sending coal to the infamous death camp Auschwitz. Rockefeller Standard Oil generously provided prison guards for the concentration camps as well. Rich with fuel, DuPont, with their interlocking control over General Motors in the 1930s, filled in their part of the bargain for Hitler. DuPont controlled General Motors, committed to full-scale production of trucks, armored cars, and tanks for the Fuhrer. In 1929, Adam Opel AG was acquired by GM in Germany. Full-scale production for war began in 1935. For their participation and contributions, James Mooney, chief executive of GM, was awarded the Order of the German Eagle by Adolf Hitler. both American Liberty League financial supporters joined to open a joint subsidiary with German chemical company IG Farben. The subsidiary provided the Nazi army with leaded gas, while IG Farben supplied poison gas, Zyklon B, for the concentration camps. This was the machine behind the attempt to recruit Smedley Butler to march a 500,000 veterans army to overthrow Franklin Roosevelt and his economic policies, the New Deal and the Glass-Steagall Act. This is Wall Street.
And there must be an end to a conduct in banking and in business which too often has given to a sacred trust the likeness of callous and selfish wrongdoing. Practices of the unscrupulous money changers stand indicted in the court of public opinion, rejected by the hearts and minds of men. Faced by failure of credit, they have proposed only the lending of more money. They only know the rules of a generation of self-seekers. They have no vision, and when there is no vision, the people perish. Yes, the money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple of our civilization. We may now restore that temple to the ancient truths.
We are in the midst of a greater threat today, with no part of the planet exempt from the terror of a total meltdown of the entire international financial system. The difference today is that we have no president. We have a virtual traitor working on behalf of the same clan that sought to overthrow President Roosevelt for challenging their power. FDR enacted Glass-Steagall to put an end to their speculative games. President Obama bails them out. Today, Wall Street doesn't need a 500,000 veteran army to convince the president to impose a fascist dictatorship in America. President Obama has already usurped the Constitution with the recent budget bill. If this present coup against the U.S. government is not overthrown, we have no chance for survival.